Something in the house felt off-kilter. Elena Mercer stood at the kitchen window, studying the orchid she had nursed for months. Its purple lips sagged despite perfect light, and watering an honest plant broadcasting distress. Lately her marriage felt the same. Water thundered in the upstairs shower. On paper, Elena and her husband Graham Cole were enviable 11 years together, a tidy 2-story home with a prize-winning garden. At 39, Elena led essays in plant biochemistry at the Regional Research Center. Graham, 42, moved money and expectations in high finance. The facade gleamed. The seams, however, had begun to show, little tells stacked up. Graham's phone dimming the instant she entered a room. Late nights that bloomed from a few into most, a sudden devotion to the gym, a new expensive cologne with no story attached. None of it proved anything. All of it made a pattern. The shower clicked off. Moments later, Graham descended in a slate suit, smoothing his cufflinks. Heading out, he said hair shellacked into place. "Coffee before you go," Elena offered. "No time. Meeting with the Midwest investors. Could be late." "The Midwest investors," she echoed, and tried to keep her tone flat. He paused at the door. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I heard you," she answered. Heartbeat climbing. "You've got that tone again," he said, setting the briefcase down. "Accusatory." Elena swallowed, then forced the words out. "You've been distant. Late nights, surprise meetings, trips that appear on the calendar the day before." Graham exhaled through his nose. "We've gone over this. I'm under pressure. The Coalbridge account can change my year. The paranoia has to stop." Paranoia. The word landed like a slap. "I'm not inventing this," Elena said quietly. "Something between us has shifted." His expression softened. Practice, she thought. He crossed the kitchen, hands warm on her shoulders. "Nothing's wrong except my workload. Coming home to suspicion doesn't help." Guilt rose unbidden. "I don't want to add stress," she murmured. "Thank you," he said, victory tucked behind his smile. He kissed her cheek. The unfamiliar cologne ghosted the air. "Love you. I'll try not to be late." The door shut before she could answer. Plants don't lie, Elena thought. When they lack light water or good soil, they show it. People learn to mask. Her phone buzzed. A message from Noah Pierce, Graham's closest friend since college, friendly with her but never private. "Hey, Elena, can we grab coffee this week? Something I should talk to you about." Her thumbs hovered. "Finally, sure." "When tomorrow, 3 p.m., Riverstone Cafe. I'll be there." She typed a small weight dropping in her stomach. That evening, when Graham returned late, Elena mentioned the coffee. A flicker surprise, then smooth composure. "Probably about Noah's girlfriend's birthday," he said lightly. The cologne lingered. The orchid drooped. Elena's intuition would not quiet. Riverstone Cafe sat at the corner of two elm-lined streets, its windows fogged slightly from the morning's cool breeze, giving way to a gentler noon. Elena arrived early and took the table near the back, where a framed lithograph of fern fronds hung above the banquette. She wrapped her hands around a mug of chamomile she didn't remember ordering, the steam softening her view of the door. Traffic hissed by. Cutlery chimed. Her pulse ticked in her ears. Noah Pierce walked in at exactly 3. He looked the way he always did, tall, composed, that understated blazer he wore through seasons, but there was an added tension in the set of his shoulders, a tightness around the mouth that suggested he'd rehearsed this moment and still wasn't ready for it. He scanned the room, saw her, and gave a thin, apologetic smile. "Hey," he said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," Elena replied, though it didn't feel like a choice. The text alone had pulled her forward like a current. A server appeared. Noah ordered a black coffee, no sugar. He watched the cup arrive as if hoping it might answer for him. When the server left, he kept his eyes on the saucer, then up at Elena in a single resolve gathering motion. "There isn't a comfortable way to start," he said. "Then don't go looking for one." Elena surprised herself. She sounded calmer than she felt. "Why did you want to meet me alone, Noah?" He drew a breath that trembled at the edges. "It's about Graham." Of course it was. The words landed with the faintest relief. At least her intuition had a name. Noah leaned forward, elbows on the table. I've been trying to figure out where the line is between loyalty and integrity, between minding my business and stopping harm. He let out a rueful half laugh. Turns out there is a line. I just kept pretending I couldn't see it. What did you see? Elena asked. Her throat felt tight. She pushed the tea away, afraid the mug would clatter in her hand. Noah's mouth flattened. A pattern at first. The late nights you already know about. The way he checked his phone and stepped outside mid-conversation. I told myself it was work, until I couldn't make that story hold anymore. He paused. 3 Fridays ago, I went to the Harborview Hotel to meet a client at the bar. I saw Graham in the restaurant. Elena heard the rest before he said it. He wasn't alone. No. Noah looked pained, as if he'd failed a course where the subject was morality open book. He had his arm around a woman. They were in the corner by the cellar door. They looked infatuated. It wasn't an ambiguous scene. What's her name? Elena asked, amazed by the steadiness of her voice. Alyssa Crane, he said. She's 28, works at Marwick and Lane, the agency handling some of Whitmore Capital's accounts. That's how they met. Alyssa. The word wasn't a name so much as a ringing. Elena stared at the fern print above Noah's shoulder. She noticed the artist had drawn each leaflet with 3 veins instead of 2, a small inaccuracy. Once seen, it couldn't be unseen. She wondered how long she'd been accommodating little inaccuracies. How long, she asked. At least 3 months, Noah said. Maybe a little more. I suspected before Harborview. I knew after. Silence spread between them. Not hostile, just necessary. Elena measured her breathing, the way she did before placing a pipette count 4 and hold 2 count 4 out. Her hands were steady. Her stomach had gone oddly cold. Do you have proof? She hated the word as soon as it left her mouth. It sounded like she doubted herself again, as if she needed a photograph to validate what her cells already understood. I wouldn't have asked you here without it. Noah pulled his phone from his pocket and swiped. He placed it face up on the table and rotated it toward her. The photo wasn't dramatic. No kiss captured. No tabloid clarity. Just 2 people leaning into each other across white tablecloth and candlelight. Graham's profile was unmistakable, the half smile he used when he wanted to be charming rather than sincere. The tilt of his head, the hand that rested behind the woman's chair like a seal of claim. Alyssa's lipstick was a bright, almost reckless red. Her gaze was lifted to him, soft, unguarded. It was intimacy, not accident. Something inside Elena unclenched and then paradoxically ached. The relief of a hypothesis confirmed. The grief of being right about the worst thing. She slid the phone back. Thank you for showing me. Noah nodded, but his face remained troubled. He saw me, Elena. That same night, across the room. He went white. He came to my place the next morning and begged me not to tell you. Said it was a mistake that he was ending it. And did you believe him? Elena asked. I've known Graham for 20 years, Noah said quietly. Long enough to recognize when he's negotiating. He wasn't contrite. He was trying to contain risk. Elena absorbed that with a small nod. The word choice contained risk fit too well. I understand if you're furious with me, Noah added quickly, for not telling you the minute I suspected. I told myself I needed certainty. I told myself it wasn't my place. Meanwhile, you were at home feeling something you could name, and I delayed. She felt an unexpected tenderness toward him, the kind reserved for people who admit late, but admit fully. I'm not angry at you, she said. I'm glad you told me now. I need to ask a favor, he said, grimacing at the ask as it formed. If Graham confronts you, and he will, please don't say I showed you the photo. He'll know I said something, but if he doesn't have the confession to throw away our friendship with, he might temper his reaction. Or maybe that's wishful thinking. Either way, I'd rather not make your life harder by becoming a new target. I won't use your name, Elena promised. This isn't about you and him. It's about me and the truth. They let the quiet settle again. Outside, a bus sighed to a stop and exhaled, its doors open. In the cafe, someone laughed too loudly at the barista's joke. Elena's gaze fell to her hands. Small soil stains lived in the lines of her palms, the kind that never left evidence of seasons spent handling root balls and compost, and living things that taught you to look beneath the surface. What will you do? Noah asked, voice softer now. Elena felt the question not like a demand, but like a space cleared for her answer to walk into. She could picture multiple paths at once, a branching pattern like leaf venation, confrontation, denial, bargaining, forgiveness, separation. Each fork carried its own weather. "I don't know yet," she said truthfully. "I know what I won't do, though. I won't barter with my reality. I won't let him tell me the sky is mauve when it's blue." Noah's expression broke into something like relief. "That sounds like you," he said. "Does it?" Elena tilted her head, curious. "The version of you that doesn't dim herself to make other people comfortable," he said. "The one who corrects the pH in a test run rather than pretending the data will sort itself out." Elena smiled, faint but real. "Thank you for reminding me she exists." They finished their drinks without hurrying. When Elena stood, the world felt surprisingly crisp, the chairs arranged in deliberate geometry, the dust motes like tiny planets in sunbeams, Noah's coffee ring on the saucer, an imperfect halo. Outside, the air carried the clean edge of coming rain. In the parking lot, Noah hesitated. "Elena, I'm sorry. For my part in the timeline of this." "You moved the timeline forward," she said, and meant it. "That matters." He nodded, as if storing the sentence away. "If you need anything practical or otherwise, call me. I don't presume to know what help looks like, but I can carry a box or sit on a couch." She almost laughed at the tenderness of the offer. "I'll keep that in mind." Driving home, Elena expected to cry. Instead, she found herself narrating facts like labels on specimen jars Graham is having an affair. The woman is Alyssa Crane. The hotel was Harborview. The duration is at least 3 months. Evidence exists. Her body handled the inventory the way it handled protocols step by step, gloves on, goggles clear. Behind the clinical cadence, something softer rose. "You are not crazy. Your perception is intact. You saw what you saw." The house met her with its routine hush. She paused in the doorway to the kitchen. The orchid on the sill looked more listless than it had in the morning, its petals bruised at the tips where they had brushed the glass. Elena set her bag down and crossed to it. She turned the pot a quarter turn to change the light angle. She pressed a fingertip into the medium, still slightly moist. She lifted one leaf, noticed the faint stippling of dust, and wiped it with the edge of her shirt. Care properly applied was not fussing. It was attention. Her phone buzzed. A message from Graham Meeting moved later than expected. "Don't wait up." She stared at the text until the words blurred. The directness of deception was almost audacious. There was a bleak mercy in audacity. It ended the contest early. Elena cooked because cooking gave her hands something to do that ended in a result she could name. She sliced fennel and onion, tossed them in a pan with olive oil until the edges browned, added chickpeas and lemon, and a fistful of herbs from the small clay pot near the sink, parsley, basil, thyme. The kitchen filled with a scent so clean, it felt like an argument for staying alive in it. While the pan hissed, she pulled a spiral notebook from the drawer where grocery lists lived and opened to a blank page. She wrote the date at the top and 2 headings beneath it, known and unknown. Under known, she listed photo at Harborview, woman's name and workplace, timeline, Graham's lies about Midwest investors, altered routine phone cologne Jim. Under unknown, she wrote scope, intent, whether he plans to leave, what confrontation yields, what outcome I want. She stared at that last line. Want felt like a risky verb glittering with implication. As a scientist, she was trained to ask what the data supported. As a woman with one life, she had to ask what she would not trade away. Her mind moved to logistics, not out of avoidance, but out of healthy instinct where documents lived, how accounts were structured, which items she'd take if she left, and which she'd leave as husks. She could call Mira at the lab. Mira's partner was a family attorney. She'd once offered a referral if you ever need someone good. Elena had laughed then and said she hoped she'd never need her. Hope she realized was a poor strategy if you use it in place of a plan. The back door opened at 9:30. Graham stepped in, tie loosened as if to suggest effort, a smear of fatigue on the face he used for sympathy. Elena plated her food and set a warm plate for him, though he texted her not to wait. She sat at the table and looked at him the way botanists look at specimens without malice, with precise curiosity. "How was the meeting?" she asked, voice level. "Fine," he said, setting his briefcase down. "Good, actually. We're getting traction with the investors." "The Midwest investors," she echoed. He missed the echo this time, or pretended to. "Yeah." He sniffed the air. "Smells amazing. Did you cook fennel?" You haven't made it in a while. I had time, she said. I met Noah today. That landed. A flicker there and gone, like a fish changing direction under a dock. Graham reached for a glass, filled it at the tap, drank, set it down carefully. What about? He wanted to talk, Elena said, which was both true and insufficient. We had coffee. Another flicker, this one more visible. Strange, he said, tone light. Probably about Lily's birthday. He never knows what to buy. Probably, Elena said. She ate. He didn't join her at the table. He hovered and then moved toward the stairs. I'm going to shower. Be down in a bit. Elena looked after him, registering the way he dragged his fingers along the banister. She listened to the shower start the familiar architecture of their home channeling sound. She pictured him setting his phone face down on the bathroom shelf, like a ritual pictured water, rinsing away the scent of a candle she hadn't lit. Back in the kitchen, she washed her plate, then dried it and returned it to the cabinet. She turned the orchid again, a smaller adjustment. When Graham came back down, hair damp, wearing his softest t-shirt, the one that telegraphed tenderness even when none was present, he found her at the table with the notebook open. What's that? He asked, pointing. My notes, she said, closing the cover without apology, about a project I'm preparing. He accepted the lie because he liked neat explanations. He sat finally and took the plate she'd left warming in the oven. You okay? He asked, a performance of concern that would have moved her once. Are you? She countered and watched his eyes. He hesitated one heartbeat too long, just tired. Me too, she said. They didn't talk about Riverstone. They didn't talk about Harborview. They coexisted for the length of a meal, two people with intersecting calendars and diverging truths. When he fell asleep later fast, the way men sleep when they believe events will bend around them, Elena lay awake and mapped the next day. Call Mira. Find a time. Ask for facts, not vengeance. Take pictures of the jewelry drawer, not to spite him, but to mark the last moment she'd pretend she didn't know. She thought of the phrase that had hounded her all week. Plants don't lie. They orient to light, or they die. She could contort herself around a shadow for another month or year, or she could turn. The rain she'd smelled at the cafe finally arrived, tapping the windows in a soft, persistent code. Elena watched it track down the glass and imagined the dust washing off leaves in the botanical garden's north greenhouse. In the morning, the city would look rinsed. Her mind settled on a single, simple boundary. She would not accept explanations that required her to ignore what she'd seen. She would not climb inside a story where her senses were liabilities. If there was to be a conversation, it would occur on ground where words and reality touched. When sleep finally took her, it did so gently, like a sheet drawn over a patient who'd come through surgery and would heal, not because someone told her she should, but because that is what living tissue does when you remove the irritant and give it air. Elena woke before dawn to a pale square of light on the ceiling and the low hum of the refrigerator calling the house back to itself. She watched the gray brighten, felt her thoughts arrive clear and quiet. She reached for the notebook, and under the line that asked what outcome she wanted, she wrote, to keep my mind, to honor my eyes, to leave any place that asks me to trade them. She paused, then added a second line, if staying costs less than that, I'll know. And if it costs more, I will go. It wasn't a plan yet, not fully, but it was a compass. Sometimes that was enough to start. Elena woke to the pale wash of dawn and the neat column she had written the night before, to keep my mind, to honor my eyes. The words had dried like ink on a contract. She showered, dressed, tied her hair back, and made the first call. Mira, it's me. Mira's voice came warm with concern. You okay? I will be, Elena said. Remember the attorney you mentioned months ago, your partner's colleague? I do. Lila Hastings, practical, unflappable. Do you want the number? I want... A conversation, Elena said. Facts. Options. Monday morning if possible. Mira didn't ask for gossip. She didn't offer platitudes. I'll text you Lila's assistant. Tell them I sent you. If you want me to sit in, I will. Thank you, Elena said, meaning. Thank you for speaking to me as a person with agency, not a problem to be pitied. She spent the next hour moving through the house, not like a ghost, but like a witness. A place holds the shape of the life lived in it drawer. Interiors, a dent in a sofa cushion, an indentation on a windowsill where a pot sits year after year. Elena opened a lockbox and photographed what mattered. deeds, policies, statements, birth certificates, just in case memory failed when heat rose. She copied what was hers by right and not by permission. She felt oddly calm. By mid-morning, Elena drove to Green Line Horticulture, a family-owned supply shop that had been a second classroom since her first year at the research center. The bell over the door jingled. Shelves held the usual saints of her world soil amendments, organic fertilizers, trays of seeds with black and white drawings that made promises with Latin names. Dr. Mercer called Mrs. Klein from behind the counter, her silver hair pinned like a spiral shell. "You look like a woman on a mission." A harmless one, Elena said and smiled. It felt good to feel a smile land without breaking. She bought what she needed for her lab trials that week. New plug trays, a small bag of coarse perlite, and then after a beat asked for something else in the plainest language she could manage. "I'm running a demonstration on how scent cues can affect foraging behavior. Basic entomology meets public outreach. Do you have any safe lures? The kind we use in controlled displays to talk about why bait stations work." Mrs. Klein's eyebrows lifted the way they did when a customer knew just enough to matter. "We keep a few educational kits for the summer camp," she said, and led Elena to a locked cabinet. "All non-toxic. The point is to show how a trace smell can call a tiny army from the ether. Kids love it." Elena held one small vial up to the light, watching the meniscus curve. The label offered nothing but a code and a warning that would have satisfied an insurance adjuster. She bought a kit and let Mrs. Klein over-explain safety until they were both complicit in refusing detail. Back home, the day had taken on the crisp edges of a checklist. She ate standing up at the counter, then pulled Graham's camping tub from the garage shelf. He called it a sanity reset with the guys, as if sanity were a thing you could reattach with a tent stake. In the past, she had rolled her eyes and argued the logistics. Today, she unsnapped the lid and set the gear out like clues. She worked as she did in the lab gloves, on mask of patience and place care without sentiment. The sleeping bag unfurled in a blue river across the tile. The fleece and the thermal base layers lay folded like a brochure promising to keep him warm. Elena thought for a moment of leaving a note inside the bag, I know. She thought, too, of how useless notes were against a man trained to edit reality. She tucked the vial away again. When she finally used it, it was not with triumph, but with precision. A whisper on fabric. A dot at the edge of a seam. A gesture so slight, it felt like tapping a glass to test for cracks. She put the kit back in a grocery sack and shoved it under the sink behind a tower of dish soap. By the time Graham came home, Elena had set the stage for a kind, reasonable spouse. Her hair was clean and soft around her face. The kitchen held the comfortable scent of roasted vegetables and rosemary. 2 glasses waited by the stove. A good bottle breathed. "What's all this?" Graham asked, shrugging off his jacket mouth already softened by the promise of ease. "You mentioned the cabin trip," Elena said. "I thought a send-off would be nice." He blinked. The blink was his tell. "You didn't want me to go." "I wanted to be heard," Elena said, letting the truth occupy the table between them. "It's not the same thing." He stepped into the space relief blooming like heat. "Thanks, Lena." The nickname floated as if he had just invented affection. "I could use a weekend without signals." Signals. She filed the word away like a specimen pin. He meant cell reception. She heard everything else. They ate. He talked. The more he talked, the more obvious the draft under the door became the kind of draft you notice only when the house is otherwise still. He described nothing of substance about the colleagues who would be there. He used plural pronouns without names. When he reached for his glass, Elena watched a small rash bloom along his wrist where the watch band had rubbed. That might have been nothing. It might have been everything. Friday morning arrived with the precision of an appointment. Elena kissed his cheek, felt the foreign cologne stake its claim on the air, and watched him load the SUV. The sleeping bag went in last, rolled tight. Graham grinned at her from the driver's seat, as if the small act of being waved off absolved him of something. Back Sunday he called. "Don't wait up." "I never do," she said, and sent him off like a ship leaving harbor while the captain ignored the tide charts. When his car disappeared, she let the smile leave her face. The house exhaled. Elena, who had spent years narrating plant resilience to school groups, see how the root mass will tolerate disturbance if you give it water. See how a stem will reorient to light within a day, gave herself the same lesson. She took the list from the refrigerator and did the things that would create margin move joint savings she had contributed to into a separate account in her name. Filed copies of everything she might need where she could find them in the dark. Put 3 days of clothing and a few books into a suitcase she could roll with one hand. At noon, she went to the bank. The teller recognized her and asked about the basil talk she had given at the library. "We haven't killed ours yet," the woman beamed. "Then I've done my job," Elena said, and signed where signatures were required. She ate a simple lunch in the park, leaning on the warm back of a bench, while a boy tried to whistle on the next seat, and his grandmother tried to teach him the secret of pursed lips. The boy failed and laughed. The sound touched a place under Elena's ribs that had been quiet for a while. At 3, she had a call with Lila's office. Monday at 9, said the assistant with the voice of someone who takes notes with a ruler. "We'll send a preliminary intake so you're not spending the whole hour on spelling your name." "Thank you," Elena said. She put the phone down and felt the smallest tremor of vertigo that comes when a bridge you've walked on for years finally reveals that it was in fact a rope. The call from Graham came just before dusk. "How's the retreat?" she asked, bright. "Awful," he snapped. "Don't start." She straightened in her chair but kept her tone. "Didn't ask you to start." "Are you okay?" "There are insects everywhere," he said, voice clipped. "I sat up and they swarmed. In the bag. In my clothes. I had to shake out everything. I can't sleep. I'm covered in bites. It's like the whole forest singled me out." "That sounds miserable," Elena said, and meant it. Pain was pain, even when it visited men who deserved a kind of metaphorical sting. "Is everyone else dealing with it too?" Silence. Then grudgingly no. "Maybe you set up near a nest," she said. "Can you move?" "Find a different spot?" I'm going to a motel for the night," he said quickly, tripping over the plurality he had built his lie upon. "Then we'll try again tomorrow." "Sleep is a good idea," Elena said. She gave him nothing to push against, the way you give nothing to a man leaning too hard on a door. "Text me if you need anything." He grunted a thanks. He didn't say "love you," neither did she. After the call, Elena stood at the kitchen sink and let the cold water run over her wrists until her skin stung. She wasn't proud of the satisfaction that had bloomed when he described the bites. She wasn't ashamed either. Some consequences do not require a judge. Some lessons are pass-fail. Saturday moved through its hours like a cleanly oiled clock. Elena washed the bedding. She put away winter clothes she should have boxed in April. She gathered the small artifacts of life's spare keys, a childhood bookmark her mother had laminated with packing tape, a lopsided clay dish a student had made for her after a career day visit, and set them in neat piles labeled with sticky notes, "Take maybe leave." She watered the plants one by one, rotating each pot a quarter turn the way she always did, so stems would grow straight. When loneliness came, it arrived not as a wave, but as a quiet absence, a chair at the table where a second person might sit and say nothing without hurting her. She let the absence sit. She had learned not to feed it with stories. Sunday afternoon glowed with a yellow you only get in late summer when the air has forgiven the noon heat and decided to be kind. Elena chopped onions and carrots and a small heel of bacon and started a pot that would become stew by patience alone. She set the table with the service they had been given at their wedding, the one she had only used for other people. Today it was for her an elegance without audience. Graham's SUV pulled into the driveway just after 6. Through the window, Elena watched him unload Movement's stiff neck dotted with red crescents where he'd scratched too hard. His face had the sheen of someone who wanted to be seen as valiant. He came through the back door and dropped the pack in the mudroom with a thud that asked to be admired. "Welcome home, Elena," said, turning from the stove. Her voice did not rise to meet him. It rested in its own register. "I need a shower," he muttered. "You wouldn't believe." "Ants?" she asked mildly, and saw his head snap a fraction of an inch. "Insects," he said, regaining composure. "Don't start. I'm going up." "Take your time," Elena said. "Dinner will be ready when you are." He vanished. Water-hammered pipes. Elena ladled stew into a heavy pot and brought it to the table on a trivet her aunt had crocheted a circle the color of raspberries. She lit 2 candles, then blew one out and left the other burning. One flame was steadier than 2. When Graham came down, he wore the soft t-shirt that advertised his sensitivity. The steam fogged his glasses. "Smells good," he said, easing into his chair, the performance of a man who deserves comfort. He served himself too much and ate too fast, as if hunger could overwrite his story. He talked about trails he hadn't hiked and men who hadn't laughed at jokes he hadn't told. Elena nodded in the right places and let the fiction spend itself. "How's Noah?" he asked finally, as if weaving random threads could repair a net. "We didn't talk today," Elena said, and offered him more bread. He took it. He scratched his wrist. He resumed talking. She let him. She watched him the way a scientist watches a reaction that has already run to completion. There is a moment in every experiment when adding heat, or stir bars, or reagent does nothing. The mixture is what it is. Elena could feel that moment humming under the table. When she cleared the dishes, she moved with the deliberateness of a person crossing a narrow bridge with a good view. She washed the bowls, she dried them, she set them back. She took the candle wick between forefinger and thumb and pinched the flame out. The kitchen fell into soft light, warm and honest. "Graham?" she said from the doorway, her hand on the back of the chair. She would not sit in again. "I want to talk." He turned, still chewing, confident enough to keep her waiting until he swallowed. "About what?" She looked at his face, familiar and suddenly plain with the startling plainness that shows up when a performance ends. "About what's true," she said. And because she was done trading her reality for anyone's comfort, Elena crossed the room and sat down across from him at the dining table she had set like a stage, steady as a plant that had turned fully toward light. "About what's true," Elena said. Graham set his spoon down as if the table might record the sound. "Elena, I'm exhausted. Can this—" "Alyssa Crane," she said cleanly. "Harborview Hotel, 3 Fridays ago, and before that." The name struck. He blinked, then reached for the old tools. "Minimize, deflect, rearrange." "She's a colleague. We met to go over a pitch." "No." Elena's voice didn't rise. It held. "I have the contours and the context. I don't need the script." He sat back, measuring angles. "Who told you?" "The truth did," she said. "And my eyes. That's enough." Silence pooled. He tried gentleness next, the version worn at the elbows. "I'm sorry," he said. "It got complicated." "It's over." "It isn't the affair that ends this," Elena replied. "It's the month you spent telling me my senses weren't trustworthy. You called it paranoia and asked me to live inside your account of the world." "I won't." A flush crept up his neck. "I was protecting us. You were protecting a story where I'm wrong for noticing what's real." She folded her hands steady. "I won't trade my mind to keep a marriage." He laughed once, sharp and credulous. "You're being dramatic." "Accurate," she said. "Here's what happens next. I meet with an attorney tomorrow at 9. I've documented what I need. I'll stay at the Milford for a week while I find a place. If you need to reach me about logistics, email. Otherwise, wait to hear from counsel." Graham's jaw tightened. "You can't just walk away from 11 years. "I'm walking toward the next 11, Elena said. "There's a difference." He tried anger, then the last mask. "I'll fight you on the house, on the savings, on everything." You can choose that, she said, not unkind, or you can choose a clean process. Either way, I'll be fine. He rose, restless, circled the table, as if a new vantage might produce a different outcome. "Who gave you this?" "Backbone Noah." His mouth curled on the name. "Did he show you a picture and make himself the hero?" Elena stood too. "No one gave me anything. I remembered what I already had." She pushed her chair in an ordinary sound that felt ceremonial. He stared, searching for purchase. "So that's it. You don't want to try counseling. You don't want to hear why." "I don't need reasons to understand disrespect," she said. "And I won't sit in a room designed to teach me how not to notice what I notice." The room held their breathing. A candle guttered and steadied. Elena took her coat from the hook and wheeled the small suitcase she'd packed that morning. At the doorway, she paused by the orchid on the sill. She rotated the pot a quarter turn so the newest leaf faced the light. "Plants orient, or they fail," she said softly. Unsure whether she was talking to him or the leaf. "You set me up," Graham snapped, suddenly grasping at a thread. "Out there, those bites. You knew." She met his eyes. "Sometimes the world answers what's called into it," she said, neither confirming nor denying. "Either way, you were the only one surprised." He opened his mouth, closed it. Something in his face, certainty, maybe cracked. "Email me your preferred time to inventory the attic," Elena added. "I'll bring labels." She left before he could repurpose her boundaries into a debate. The night air held the clean edge of day-old rain. At a red light, she felt for panic and found only space like a field after harvest. The Milford's lobby smelled faintly of lemon and paper. Elena checked in, carried her bag to a room that didn't know her history, and set the orchid from the passenger seat on the narrow desk. She opened the window an inch enough for honest air. On the bed, she took out the notebook and turned to the page labeled Unknown. She crossed out one line whether he plans to leave, and wrote instead whether I do. Then she drew an arrow to the margin and wrote I did. Weeks turned like pages. Paperwork found its rhythm. The worst conversations happened once, and then not again. Elena found a sunlit one-bedroom with wood floors and a balcony that wanted mint and cherry tomatoes. She bought a second-hand table scarred by other meals and set it by the window. Every morning, light made a clean square on it like a promise. On a Tuesday, she stood in the research center's small auditorium, delivering a talk on scent cues and non-toxic pest management for community gardeners. She held up a vial, not the one from under her sink, but its cousin, and watched faces lean in. We make better decisions, she told the room, when we trust the evidence and the part of us that notices patterns before we can name them. After, in the hallway, Noah waited with paper cups and a question he wore lightly. How are you? Oriented, she said, and smiled. He nodded toward a flyer on the corkboard. Therapeutic garden volunteers needed, and lifted a shoulder. If you ever want to help design a place where children can learn that things grow back, I know a director who'd say yes in a heartbeat. Send me the details, Elena said. I like the sound of that. Back home, she turned the orchid a quarter turn and watched it accept the light without argument. Outside the balcony, mint lifted its small bright leaves. Inside, a woman believed her own eyes and built a life that fit them. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.